The road narrowed the further you went, like it was warning you off. Asphalt gave way to gravel, gravel to dirt, and soon, even that was broken by weeds and jutting stones. Jake Turner eased his old Ford pickup around a curve, squinting through the windshield as overhanging branches scraped the roof with a sound like fingernails on slate. He hadn't meant to find the place. Not exactly. He was a real estate photographer, the kind who usually made foreclosed suburban homes look more inviting than they deserved. But this listing, this old farmhouse, had been different. The email had come without a sender's name, only an address tucked deep in Chester County farmland and a short, almost desperate note. Please take photos. Must sell payment on delivery. He should have ignored it. But bills had been piling up, and desperation had a way of sounding familiar. So he followed the back roads until the GPS lost signal, and the world became a patchwork of barren fields and skeletal trees. Hell of a drive, he muttered, as if the empty fields might agree. The house revealed itself suddenly, at the end of a rutted lane that looked more like a deer trail than a driveway. It stood alone, hunched in gray, its roofline sagging, its windows black as missing teeth. Weeds and thorn bushes had swallowed the front yard, curling around the porch posts like they were trying to drag the whole thing back into the dirt. Silence slammed down so hard he noticed his own heartbeat. No chirping birds, no wind in the grass. Just the creak of cooling metal as the truck settled. He stepped out, gravel crunching under his boots. The air smelled faintly of rot and wet earth. His camera bag swung against his side as he walked up the path, pushing through waist-high weeds that whispered against his jeans. The closer he got, the worse the house looked. The paint wasn't just peeling, it had sloughed away in strips, leaving the boards beneath raw and splintered. Shingles curled like old scabs. The porch sagged in the middle as though something heavy had once stood there too long. Ouch. Jake raised his camera out of habit and snapped a test shot. The shutter echoed louder than it should have in the stillness. He glanced at the screen, frowning. The photo had come out dark, the windows smudged with shadow that hadn't been there a moment ago. He looked up. The house stared back. That was the only way he could think of it. The windows weren't windows anymore. They were eyes. Empty, expectant, watching. Jake gave a quick shake of his head and laughed under his breath. Get a grip, Turner. He'd been on plenty of old properties before, and they all had the same heavy air of abandonment, like grief you could walk through. This was no different. Still, the hair on his arms prickled as he mounted the porch steps. Each board groaned, long and low, as if reluctant to hold his weight. He froze when one of them gave a loud crack beneath his boot, the sound ricocheting through the stillness. That's when he heard it. A creak, faint but deliberate, from inside the house, like someone shifting their weight on the other side of the door. Jake swallowed, his throat dry. He glanced back at the truck parked at the lane's end, its presence comforting and small. He could still leave. Nobody would know. The anonymous client, whoever they were, could go to hell. But he didn't leave. Instead, he adjusted the strap on his shoulder, set his jaw, and reached for the doorknob. The brass was cold, far colder than the September air should have allowed. He pulled his hand back instinctively, flexing his fingers. When he tried again, the knob turned to easily, as if the lock had been waiting for him. The door swung inward without a sound. Darkness yawned beyond. Not the natural gloom of an empty house, but something thicker, heavier. Jake felt it press against his chest. He hesitated on the threshold, suddenly aware of his own reflection in the camera lens dangling from his neck. The glass seemed to ripple, just for a heartbeat, as if something else had been looking out. A gust of air rolled past him, faintly sour, and the door eased wider on its own. Jake exhaled shakily. "All right," he whispered to himself. "Let's get this over with." He stepped inside. Behind him, the door clicked shut, and for the briefest second, in the silence that followed, he thought he heard a whisper low, impossible to place, curling up from the walls themselves. Jake didn't go back to the farmhouse right away. Told himself it was because of lighting, better to photograph in late afternoon than high noon. Truth was, the house had unsettled him, and he wasn't ready to admit it. So he drove into the nearest town, a place called Willow Creek. It wasn't much more than a diner, a gas station, and a string of shuttered shops on Main Street. The kind of town that seemed paused somewhere in the 1970s and forgotten. He slid into a booth at the diner, ordered a coffee, and set up his laptop. The Wi-Fi was weak, but strong enough for him to search the address he'd been given. The first result wasn't a real estate listing. It was a yellowed newspaper scan from 20 years back. Family of 3 vanishes from Chester farmhouse. Jake leaned closer. The article was vague, heavy on speculation. The Matheson family husband, wife, young daughter had simply disappeared one night. Dinner plates still on the table, front door locked from the inside. No signs of struggle, no bodies ever found. A second article popped up. 10 years earlier, teenagers missing after party at abandoned farmhouse. No remains, just a broken camera left behind with its film torn out. The further Jake dug, the worse it got. Fires that had mysteriously gone out before consuming the structure, farmhand who accidentally shot himself cleaning a rifle, a woman found wandering the county road incoherent, clothed stiff with blood that wasn't hers. The house wasn't just abandoned, it was avoided. The bell over the diner door jingled, and Jake glanced up. An old man shuffled in, wiry and bent, wearing a brown cap that looked as old as he was. He noticed Jake, hesitated, then limped toward his booth. "You went up there." His voice was raspy, but certain. Jake blinked. "Excuse me?" The farmhouse. The old man's pale eyes were sharp despite the years. "I can see it on you." Jake forced a smile. "I'm just taking photos for a client. Didn't know it was a big deal." The old man gripped the back of the booth, leaning in. His hand shook faintly, mottled with liver spots. "It's not a house. Not anymore. You hear me? It's a mouth. And every fool that walks in feeds it." Jake stiffened. "Look, I don't buy into ghost stories. It's just a property." The old man's lips thinned. It's what the last one said, and the ones before. House gets in your head, watches you, starts small shadows where they don't belong, sounds you can't place. Then it gets hungrier. Jake felt that prickle again, the one he'd felt standing on the porch. He pushed it down.
Good morning, but I've got a job to do.
"You don't understand." The man's voice cracked into something almost desperate. "Folks round here learned the hard way. Go near that place. You don't come back the same if you come back at all. Best thing you can do is forget it, son. Drive back to the city, delete that address, and never think about it again." The waitress appeared, coffee pot in hand. She gave the old man a wary look. "Earl, leave him be."
"What's your business?"
Earl's jaw worked, but after a moment, he let go of the booth and shuffled back toward the counter. Jake watched him go, unease curling in his stomach. He closed the laptop and stared at the black screen. his reflection faint. Those words clung to him like burrs. A mouth. He thought of the way the windows had seemed to stare, the way the doorknob had been colder than it should have been. It was nonsense, just stories. Old towns always had them urban legends spun into warnings. He wasn't a kid around a campfire. He was a professional. Paycheck was waiting. Still, when Jake drove back down the county roads toward the farmhouse, the shadows between the trees seemed darker. The silence pressed harder. When the roofline appeared again over the tall grass, it didn't look abandoned at all. It looked expectant. Jake returned to the farmhouse the next afternoon, this time with his gear fully prepped. Tripod, wide-angle lens, spare batteries, practical, professional. He told himself he was here to work, nothing more. But standing in the front hall, he knew it wasn't going to feel like work. The air inside was heavier, colder, as though the house had been sealed for decades. Dust lay thick on every surface, muting the outlines of broken furniture. A staircase climbed the left wall, its railing cracked and bent. To the right, a parlor opened into shadow, its wallpaper curling away in long yellowed strips. Jake lifted his camera and began shooting. Flash illuminated the space in harsh bursts, freezing cobwebs in mid-drift, catching the dull gleam of nails sticking out of boards. He checked the first few shots. Fine, just wood and dust. Just a house. Silence, however, was wrong. Silence should have been still. This wasn't. This was listening. Jake moved into the parlor. An overturned rocking chair lay on its side. Toys were scattered across the warped floorboard's marbles. A tin fire truck, a porcelain doll missing its eyes. He crouched, frowning. Toys didn't belong here. The Matheson disappearance had been 20 years ago, but the doll's dress wasn't rotted or moth-atoned. It looked almost new. A scrape echoed behind him. Jake spun, camera raised like a weapon. The hall was empty, but he could swear he'd heard something move. A chair leg against the floor, a footstep. He laughed under his breath, too sharp. Critters, raccoon maybe. The laugh died in the air. He snapped more shots, pushing deeper into the house. In the dining room, the table was still set. Plates coated with dust, glasses cloudy, silverware lined neatly as though dinner had been waiting all this time. He leaned close. One plate had faint smudges in the dust fingerprints. Recent. Jake shivered and backed into the hall. The staircase loomed. He aimed the camera upward and took a picture. The flash lit the landing. For an instant, he thought he saw someone standing there, thin still. When he blinked, the landing was empty. Jesus, his voice cracked. He gripped the banister, its wood soft with rot, and forced himself up the stairs. Each step groaned. The air grew colder. Upstairs, the hallway stretched long and narrow, lined with closed doors. Wallpaper here was darker, patterned with faded roses that seemed to lean toward him. He opened the first door, a child's bedroom. The bed was small, sheets stained yellow with age. Crayons littered the floor. The walls were covered in scratches, not drawings, but words carved into plaster with something sharp. It watches. It waits. It's hungry. Over and over, filling every inch of wall space until the letters overlapped. Jake stumbled back, camera shaking in his grip. His flash went off by accident, freezing the words in stark relief. Another sound. Light, careful, at the far end of the hall. Footsteps. Hello. His voice echoed strangely as if the house swallowed it. No answer. He edged toward the noise, heart hammering. The second door creaked open as he approached. Hadn't touched it. Inside was a study. Dust-clogged bookshelves leaned against the walls. Papers were scattered across a desk. Their ink bled into unreadable stains. On the far wall hung photographs in crooked frames. Jake raised the camera. The flash revealed smiling families posed stiffly in front of the farmhouse through the decades. He moved closer. His stomach turned. Every single photo had faces scratched out. Not blurred, not faded scratched, violently gouged until the paper tore. Parents, children, even the dog in one photo gone. Only the house remained clear in every image, untouched, sharp, eternal. Jake's breath came shallow. He lowered the camera slowly, and then he heard it. Whispering. Soft, indistinct, like words spoken from the corner of the room. No one there. The whispering grew louder. Not words exactly, more like breath against his ear. The camera strap tugged suddenly against his neck. He yelped, spinning, but nothing had touched it. The strap dangled free, swinging gently as if someone had just brushed past. Jake backed out of the study, nearly tripping over the threshold. The hallway seemed longer now, stretching away in impossible perspective. Doors shifted, their angles subtly wrong. The whispering followed him. He fled down the stairs, boots thundering against wood. At the bottom, the front door loomed. He grabbed the knob, twisted, locked. He hadn't locked it. Jake rattled it hard, shoving with his shoulder. The wood didn't budge. A cold draft rolled down the hall behind him, brushing the back of his neck like fingers. He froze, slowly turned. The rocking chair in the parlor was upright now, rocking gently. Jake's throat closed. He lifted the camera without thinking, snapped a photo. Flash. The chair was empty, but the motion hadn't stopped. It rocked forward, backward, slow and steady, as if someone unseen was still seated there. Jake staggered away, breath ragged. His rational mind fought for explanations, settling wood, drafts, rodents. But deep down, something in him had already accepted the truth. The house wasn't abandoned. It had been waiting, and it knew he was here. Jake told himself he was leaving now. Screw the photos. Screw the mystery client. He didn't need the money this badly. Shoved at the front door again, hard enough to rattle the frame. Locked. He tried the windows in the front hall. Each one refused to budge. Glass cold under his fingertips. He thought about smashing one, but the wood felt too dense, too unyielding. As if the entire frame had grown around the glass. His chest tightened. The house wasn't going to let him out. He turned circles in the hall, sweat prickling his temples. Okay, calm down. Backdoor kitchen. There's always a way. The kitchen was worse. The floor sloped, warped by years of water damage. Rusted pots dangled from hooks, clinking faintly, though no air stirred. The back door hung crooked in its frame. He lunged for it, twisted the knob, nothing. The hinges groaned, not with movement, but with resistance, like muscle flexing against him. The overhead bulb flickered on by itself, single bare bulb swaying slightly. Jake stumbled back. The bulb's swing slowed, stopped. The kitchen settled into silence again. He retreated to the dining room, clutching his camera like a talisman. He thought about Earl, the old man at the diner. It's a mouth. The house was breathing. He could hear it now, under the silence. A faint rhythmic creak in the walls, like wood stretching in and out. The air seemed to pulse. The sun sank while he moved from room to room, trying every exit, every window. Shadows thickened across the warped floors. When he checked his phone, the screen was black, dead. He knew he'd charged it that morning. By the time he noticed the dark, it was too late. Night had fallen, sudden and complete, pressing against the windows like ink. No stars, no moon, just blackness. And the house came alive. The first door slammed shut upstairs. Then another, and another. Bang after bang, like someone running through the hall, kicking doors. Jake flinched with every crash, heart galloping. "Who's there?" His own voice cracked in the air, swallowed instantly. The slamming stopped. He crept to the staircase, craning upward. The landing was lost in shadow, but he could feel weight up there. Not footsteps, exactly more like attention. The same way you knew when someone was staring at you across a room. The banister trembled under his hand, not shaking, breathing. Jake let go so fast his palm burned. He backed into the parlor, into the flicker of his flashlight beam. The rocking chair was still rocking, faster now, its creak in perfect rhythm with his heartbeat. A picture frame slipped from the wall and shattered. He flinched, and in the shards he caught his reflection, distorted, stretched as if the glass didn't want to hold his shape. Something moved in the corner of his eye. He swung the light, nothing, just dust motes drifting. But when he turned back, the arrangement of the room was different. The doll lay in the center of the rug now, its eyeless face tilted toward him. He was certain it had been upstairs. Jake's breath came ragged. The presence pressed tighter around him. He realized the truth with sick clarity. He wasn't alone. The house was watching him. Windows groaned in their frames, glass shifting like pupils dilating. Curtains fluttered though the air was dead. Shadows slid across the walls without a source. They weren't cast. They were moving of their own accord. Jake retreated, flashlight jerking wildly. He stumbled into the hallway, and the door to the study slammed shut behind him, hard enough to rattle the ceiling. He tried the knob, it was sealed. Another slam upstairs, and another to his left, one by one, doors closing until every route back was gone. He realized what was happening. The house wasn't just shutting him in, it was hurting him. Stop it. His voice was hoarse, useless. Another door slammed ahead, forcing him toward the dining room again. The table still sat with its neat arrangement of plates and silverware, except now the dust was gone. Each plate was full. Meat, potatoes, pea steam rising. Forks laid beside them. 3 chairs pulled back as if waiting. Jake shook his head. No. The smell hit him. Then rich, greasy, cloying. But underneath, sour rot. He gagged, backing away, and the chair legs scraped against the floor, pushing themselves in, unseating guests that weren't there. The air hummed, not sound, vibration. The whole house seemed to lean closer. Jake staggered into the kitchen again, frantic. Drawers rattled. A knife slid out with a metallic scrape, clattering across the counter toward him. He jolted back, heart seizing, and nearly tripped on the uneven floor. Every light in the house flickered on at once, yellow, buzzing, sickly bright. Then off. Total darkness. Jake froze. Couldn't hear the slamming anymore. Couldn't hear the creaks of settling wood. Only his own breath. and then footsteps. Slow, heavy, coming down the staircase. Jake swung the flashlight toward the hall. The beam cut across the banister, catching the edge of the landing. Empty. The footsteps continued, unhurried. Descending, he backed away until his shoulders struck the counter. The beam shook in his hands. The footsteps stopped. "Hello?" His whisper sounded pathetic. Something answered. Not words, laughter. Soft, low, too close to come from upstairs. It seemed to rise from the walls themselves, vibrating through the studs, curling around him like smoke. Jake's skin crawled. His heart thrashed against his ribs. He realized with clarity sharp as broken glass. He wasn't a trespasser here, wasn't even a guest. He was prey, and the house was studying him. The lights flickered back on, caught his reflection in the dark window above the sink. Except it wasn't his reflection. It smiled. By the time they found the door to the basement, the house had already taken too much from them. Jake's camera bag lay abandoned in the hall, one strap torn loose. The lens cracked down the middle like an injured eye. Maria clutched his arm tight, her knuckles bone-white, her breath ragged. They hadn't spoken in 10 minutes, not since the last door slammed behind them on its own. It was easier not to speak. Every word seemed to echo too far in this place, like someone or something was listening from just beyond the walls. The basement door had been disguised, almost deliberately, behind a wardrobe swollen with rot. They had only found it because Maria tripped, her hand landing against a sliver of brass knob poking out from behind the warped wood. Jake pulled the wardrobe aside, every scrape of wood on wood sounding like nails on a coffin lid. The knob turned. The door opened, a cold draft, damp and sour, spilled out from the blackness below, and the steps groaned under their weight as they descended. The smell thickened the deeper they went, mildew, iron, and something sweeter, something wrong. Jake gagged, one arm across his face. Maria whispered a prayer under her breath. The basement stretched wider than it should have, its stone walls sweating with moisture. Candles sat on warped tables, their wax melted down to nubs, yet still somehow giving off the faintest smoke, as if they'd been burning only moments ago. Then Jake saw the marks. They covered the walls, circles, spirals, jagged symbols etched deep into the stone with something sharper than a knife. The grooves were dark, caked, almost black. Dried blood, Jake realized. Not old paint, not rust. Blood. Maria's voice shook. This isn't just some abandoned farmhouse. They moved deeper, their footsteps crunching over scattered bones. Not animal bones. Not unless animals wore children's shoes and left behind finger bones small enough to belong to a doll. Maria pressed a hand to her mouth, her eyes flooding. Jake felt his stomach twist, bile rising. At the far wall, they found a trunk. Oak, iron-bound, its lid warped but intact. Jake knelt, his hands trembling as he pried the latch free. The hinges screamed when he lifted it. Inside lay books. Not just any books, journals. Dozens of them bound in cracked leather, their pages browned with age. Jake pulled one free, brushing dust from its cover. The title was scrawled in a sharp, impatient hand. The Ledger of the House. He flipped it open. The handwriting inside crawled across the page like something alive. Jagged lines pressed so deep into the paper they cut through. Dates ran down the margins. 1864, 1869, 1872, next to them names. Dozens, hundreds, each one followed by a note in the same impatient scrawl. Suitable, weak, refused the offering, taken into the walls. Maria clutched another journal, her lips moving as she skimmed the words. They didn't just live here. They fed it. Jake frowned. Fed what? She turned the book toward him. On the page was a drawing childlike in its simplicity, terrifying in its detail. A crude sketch of the farmhouse itself, its windows drawn as eyes, its door as a gaping mouth. Lines radiated out from it like veins and scrawled beneath. The house is awake. The house remembers. The house waits. Jake's chest tightened. They worship the damn thing. Maria's voice broke. No. What? They built it. They made it this way. They sifted through more journals, the story unraveling in fragments. The family who lived here, Freem Cutter, his wife Margaret, and their 3 children had been exiled from their church in the late 1800s. Whispers of heresy, blood rituals, human sacrifice. They came to this land because no one else wanted it, built their home plank by plank, and poured every cruelty, every dark prayer into its bones, and the house had listened. It had swallowed their malice, their hunger, until the walls themselves breathed with it. The Cutter's children were the first to vanish, given to the walls according to the notes. Their neighbors followed, then travelers, wanderers, anyone unlucky enough to stumble across the place. Maria dropped the journal with a sob, backing away from the trunk. Jake, it's not haunted. It's alive. It's been alive all along. Jake didn't argue. Couldn't, because as she spoke, he felt it too, the way the air shifted around them. The faint tremor under their feet, like the heartbeat of something buried deep. The walls groaned, stone grinding on stone, and dust sifted from the ceiling. The house was listening. Worse, it was pleased. A scraping sound drew their eyes to the far corner. Another trunk, smaller, its lid half collapsed. Inside lay scraps of cloth, rusted jewelry, and bones. Children's bones. Tiny skulls, jawbones, rib cages, each one arranged with sickening care, like trophies. Maria stumbled back against the wall, her hands clawing at the damp stone, as if she could push through it and escape. Jake closed the journal and shoved it back into the trunk, his breathing ragged. The air grew heavier. Low hum vibrated through the basement, through their bones. The candles long dead flickered back to life, each flame burning black instead of gold. Shadows leaped up the walls, and the symbols carved there seemed to pulse like fresh wounds. Maria whispered, "It doesn't just watch. It waits. It waits to decide." The floor shifted beneath them, just slightly, like the boards above were breathing. The hum deepened, the walls closing in. Jake grabbed her hand, squeezing tight, his eyes locked on the trunk of journals. The last page he'd read came back to him, the words etched in his mind as if the house itself had branded them there. The house does not take all. The house chooses. He looked around the basement, his stomach turning cold. This wasn't a place of random horror. It was a farm, a harvest. And now it was their turn under the sickle. They didn't speak as they climbed out of the basement. There was nothing left to say. Both of them knew what the journals meant, what the house had become. The air upstairs felt even thicker than before, each breath dragging like wet cloth through their lungs. Jake kept Maria close, his hand gripping hers so tight her fingers went numb. "We're leaving," he said, his voice raw, more prayer than statement now. The front door was their first choice. They bolted down the hall, past wallpaper that writhed like skin, past photographs where the faces had blurred into smears of shadow. Jake reached the door, grabbed the knob, and pulled with every ounce of strength he had left. The knob spun uselessly in his hand. The wood trembled, the frame swelling, sealing itself. When he shoved his shoulder against it, the door didn't budge. Instead, it exhaled. Warm, damp air hissing out between the cracks like the house itself was laughing at him. "Back door," Maria gasped. They ran through the kitchen, where pots and pans clattered off their hooks, as if invisible hands were shaking them. The back door loomed ahead, its glass panes reflecting their pale, desperate faces. Jake grabbed the handle locked. He slammed his boot against it once, twice. The third time, the glass should have shattered, but instead it rippled like water, the reflection distorting. Twisting until the faces staring back weren't theirs anymore. Maria screamed and yanked him away. "Windows," Jake barked, dragging her into the parlor. They threw themselves at the nearest one, pulling, pounding. The glass rattled but held, no matter how hard they hit it. Outside. The yard was visible, the lane stretching back toward the safety of the road. But the view was wrong. The grass seemed taller, the truck was gone. And at the farthest edge, just visible through the rippling weeds, a dark shape shifted closer.
I just stepped back just to hear it. It's changing. It's changing everything.
Maria clutched his arm, tears streaming down her face. "Won't let us go." The stairs groaned above them, a slow, deliberate creak. Then another. Something moving, coming. Panic took over. Jake dragged her toward the staircase, desperate for some other exit. The second floor might have a window, an escape onto the roof. The steps flexed under their weight, the railing shuddering like it wanted to throw them off. They reached the landing, hearts pounding, and turned down the hallway. It stretched farther than it should have. Too far. Doors lined the walls, more than Jake remembered, 10, 12, maybe 20. Each one identical, each one humming faintly, the vibrations worming through his skull. "Jake," Maria's voice broke. "This wasn't here before." He didn't answer. He pulled her toward the nearest door and threw it open. Another hallway. Longer. Identical. The doors lining it pulsed, each one breathing in and out like lungs. Maria stumbled, sobbing, or trapped. Jake turned in circles, sweat dripping into his eyes, his chest heaving. He thought of the journals, of the words burned into his mind. "The house chooses." Something whispered his name. Not Maria. Not his own voice. The walls themselves spoke it, soft and tender, like a lover. "Jakey." The floor lurched. Maria screamed as the boards split beneath her feet. Jake caught her hand, holding on with every ounce of strength he had left. The gap widened, the wood splintering into a black maw below. Something moved in that darkness, pale and grasping. "Jake," Maria shrieked, her nails digging into his skin. He pulled, muscles burning, veins screaming. "Hold on." The boards cracked again. The smell of rot and earth surged upward, gagging him. The shadows coiled, wrapping around her ankles like snakes. She screamed, jerking, fighting, but the house had chosen "don't let go," she begged. Jake's grip slipped, sweat slicking their palms.
Ow!
For a second, he saw her face lit by the dim hall light-wide, desperate, full of terror, and she was gone. The floor slammed shut, smooth and whole. as if she had never been there at all. Jake collapsed onto his knees, his chest heaving, his arms trembling. The house was silent again, except for the faint, satisfied creak of the walls. He pressed his forehead to the floor, his voice breaking into a ragged sob. Please, not me. Please. The silence stretched, patient. The house was listening and waiting. Jake didn't remember standing up. One moment he was on his knees, sobbing over the boards that had swallowed Maria whole. The next, he was stumbling through the house like a man underwater, each step slow, each breath ragged. The halls had shifted again. No matter which way he turned, he always ended up back in the parlor. The furniture loomed in the shadows, the wallpaper sagged like old skin, and the front door waited mocking him. He staggered to it anyway. His hands clawed at the knob, beating, pulling, screaming, until his voice cracked. The wood shuddered under his fists, but did not give. The house was calm, patient. The whisper came again, softer this time, almost kind. Jake. He froze. The sound wasn't outside him, it was inside, curling through his skull, sliding behind his eyes. One remains. One must be given. He shook his head violently. No, you already. The boards under his feet flexed. A low groan rippled through the walls. The house wasn't asking, it was reminding. Maria hadn't been enough. It wanted him to understand, not random. It's never random. Choice. The memory of the journals returned with sick clarity. The house does not take all. The house chooses. And in choosing, it demanded something in return. An offering, a balance. Jake staggered back from the door, his chest heaving, his mind clawed at possibilities. He had no one left to give, no one but himself. Is that it? He croaked, his voice raw. You want me? Is that what this is about? The chandelier above him swayed, though no wind stirred. The house answered with silence, a silence so deep it vibrated in his bones. Jake laughed bitterly, the sound breaking in his throat. I won't do it. I won't just lie down for you. But even as he said it, exhaustion pulled at him, a heaviness in his limbs, a weight that made his knees buckle. His reflection in the parlor mirror caught his eye, and for a second, just a second, he swore there were two of him. Broken, trembling. The other calm, smiling faintly, as if already surrendered. He backed away, shaking, clutching his chest. His heart thundered so loud it felt like the whole house pulsed with it. Maria, he whispered, his throat closing. Her name was both a prayer and an apology. The floorboards creaked beneath him, softer now, coaxing. The house was waiting for his answer. Jake sank to his knees. He closed his eyes. He didn't speak again. Silence swelled. The air grew warmer. And then, without ceremony, the front door eased open. Just a crack. Just enough. Looked up. Beyond was the road, the weeds, the night, freedom. But his legs wouldn't move. He stared at the sliver of moonlight and felt nothing but dread, because he understood now leaving wasn't escape. The house had chosen him, marked him. Whether inside its walls or outside on the road, he belonged to it. The door creaked wider, inviting him out. Jake stood, trembling, and stepped forward. Behind him, the house settled into silence again, patient, watching. And as the last of his shadow slipped through the doorway, the walls gave one final groan, deep and satisfied, like something exhaling after a meal. The door closed. The farmhouse waited, And now, as you read these words, you might notice it too. The feeling of eyes on you, just over your shoulder, just behind the screen. The house that waits, the house that watches. And it knows you now.